Wait, so if I don't love this movie, I get lumped in with all the basement dwellers who compensate for their deeply rooted fears of the labia by kicking off about Ghostbusters reboots and Star Wars sequels, and only seem to find a moment's peace if you softly whisper the word Snyder Cut in their ears? Wow. I mean, I liked Captain Marvel a lot. I didn't love it, but damn. It's easy to forget the cultural moment we found ourselves facing in the run-up to Black Panther last year. Like, that was a tentpole movie with serious diversity cred that then, in subversion of what usually happens, actually managed to deliver on its potential. First superhero movie with a Best Picture nod, yo! Yep, I am still hyped about that. But you can be forgiven for thinking that if Marvel could deliver that then, and, given that Wonder Woman did a pretty good job for another relative win, well, this would be an easy win, right? And for the most part, well, it is. It's got mid-level spectacle, some run and jump fun with girl power 90s cred, it's got some laughs, a good cast, a cute animal sidekick, just kind of feels like they forgot to include, I don't know, feeling? Like it's good, but it feels like a movie with no more ambition outside of the title character herself, so as a movie, it kind of gives off that mid-level quality of the average, movie of the 90s, a little more often than it kind of successfully plays for an outwardly intended 90s riff. And in no way does it feel intentional. And I feel that's really odd given the story they're trying to tell with Captain Marvel. So straight up, I'm pretty in the dark on the whole Carol Danvers mythology. For me, on a comics level, she pretty much shows up for crossover event series and serves like Superman with hand beams, so I was in the blank slate going into this. The plot sees her positioned as like an amnesiac soldier for the alien race known as the Kree, the big blue dudes from Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're fighting a seemingly endless war against these like lizard-like shapeshifter aliens named Skrulls. Crashing on Earth in 1995, Carol, who's Brie Larson for the MCU, teams up with Nick Fury, a two-eyed, jaded agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And, they set out to uncover not only the truth about her past, but also potentially put an end to the Kree-Skrull war once and for all. It makes for a pretty great movie concept, and for the most part, it does absolutely work. Larson's pretty immediately likable as Danvers, and it's the kind of role I've kind of wanted to see her in since like the time of Short Term 12 and 21 Jump Street. She's all about the individually raised eyebrows and put downs, but she's allowed to be fleetingly kind of admirably vulnerable at the same time. I just don't think the story really stopped long enough to really explore that bit too effectively for me. But Jackson's a hoot, like as ever. He's been CGI de-aged for this, which kind of seems fruitless, because he's like 90 years old at this point and hasn't aged a day since the actual period in which this movie is set, but, when you got that Marvel money to spend, eh? And the buddy comedy dynamic between Danvers and Fury, that's great fun. That's actually worth seeing the movie for on its own, but quite why it's shoehorned into this first actual female-driven Marvel flick is a bit of a mystery to me, I'm not gonna lie. And also because I'm just half pissed that it's not just Jenny Agutter as a younger Kick-Ass version of that S.H.I.E.L.D. director instead of Fury. Still, points for doing one of these without having to resort to the nauseating romance element. I mean, even Wonder Woman couldn't help itself with that one. The absence, though, of emotional investment, that does feel a little bit persistent here. I mean, we care about Carol because she's our lead and she's the title character, and Larson's damn likable anyway, but considering what the movie ultimately feels closest to, which is basically Gamora from the first Guardians movie getting to do the plot of the first Thor movie in an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. season finale, well, you'd expect to be more rooted in it than you actually become. And the Gamora point's a particular stickler because, well, the depictions of Gamora and Carol Danvers largely come from very similar places. It's just that Gamora was afforded a lot more in terms of the human condition, while Danvers just gets injected with more mid-90s studio-level cool than anything else. And that's a particular disappointment when you consider just how many of the Marvel origin movies hung together solely because you cared about their hero. And I'm looking at you, Thor. Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who make a real leap as regards both scale and genre here, well, they make for solid enough but pretty unremarkable directors. They had a final hand in the screenplay too, but not before the likes of Nicole Perlman, Meg LaFauve, and Genevieve Robert Direct got some input, and to be fair, the number of cooks involved there does go a long way toward explaining Captain Marvel's ultimate emotional deficiency. Maybe it just got lost in the shuffle. Which is fair enough. I mean, the movie's still pretty enjoyable anyway, and that third act is an armrest-gripping, all-out intergalactic needle drop. And, oh, speaking of needle drops, by the way, the soundtrack on this thing is insane. I mean, there's so many great bangers in there, a few of which admittedly don't make a lick of sense with the whole 1995 setting, but, you know, who actually cares, right? Plus, if you're an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan, you're absolutely gonna dig the sort of prequel-y elements this kind of offhandedly drops in for that. Like prototype Quinjets, Coulson being a rookie, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's really fun, and it does remind you what the MCU's sadly lacking since the whole, you know, no longer canon determination a few years ago. Even though Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is still sat in the corner like a jilted ex at this stage, tearfully professing, "But I still love you," with so many stealth crossover nods going for it. It's just heartbreaking to watch sometimes. Looking at the supporting cast, Ben Mendelsohn, you know, gleeful champion of the, well, I love to despise you villain. He gets to do exactly that with a touch more depth than he typically gets to weaponize for popcorn fare, but he does get to embrace a kind of broad pulp tone to it. Annette Bening's got her reliable grandeur to utilize, you know, as she does, and, well, the movie itself, though, just in no way utilizes her enough for my liking. And the cadre of sort of Danvers' Kree military squad, you know, this little Delta force that she belongs to, that's like Jude Law and Gemma Chan and Jaimin Hunsu. They're a varied and pretty memorable bunch. You know, they stand out. They have individual characters in that sort of John McTiernan Predator kind of way. I particularly like the chemistry between Jude Law and Brie Larson. That really works. Gotta admit, though, not enough Coulson in this for me. I mean, I know the guy has an entire TV spin-off at this point, but not enough. No. He's back in the big leagues for a change. Let him take a proper swing. Captain Marvel is, as I say, a good time at the movies, but it's not entirely successful as a movie on its own terms. It's a standalone for the most part, sure, but there is a hollowness to anything in it that isn't specifically Carol Danvers, and outside of a couple of really slick sort of battle visuals from cinematographer Ben Davis, well, there's no distinct vision to Danvers' story beyond just telling it, and, well, it's a very functional film. Like, it's fine on that level, I guess. Also, I'd imagine if you're a complete newbie with these, you're gonna have more than a few niggling, what's that thing, and why are my Marvel friends looking all surprised kind of questions, particularly when they crowbar in one MacGuffin too many, which, incidentally, if you've seen this, really? I mean, let's not Prometheus this thing, okay? Let's just go right the hell to LV-426 and stop dicking around. And that's to say nothing of a certain level of pretentious table setting that's going on for a certain inevitable, you know, finger-clicky event that you know Carol Danvers is going to have to take part in if you stuck around after the end credits back in April. But in that same way, though, that the Benedict Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange just, you know, worked, and then it worked again on a whole other level once he was past his origin into the shared universe mix. I mean, same thing here. I have no doubt whatsoever we're going to see the same with Brie Larson and Carol Danvers. I feel like we get a little kind of push towards that because the texture of the world around her just isn't really there until the third act, when it also suddenly starts to get a lot more colourful, and, well, you feel like you click into being invested in that a little too late in the game. But, you know, you've still had some fun along the way. The scenes with her and Fury just riffing, they are fun as hell. I can't wait to see her own Thor and Banner, like presumably in a month's time. But as a feature film in its own right, I can't see Captain Marvel becoming anyone's like favorite MCU flick. It offers the very, very sorely overdue focus on female heroes that this universe is kind of needed outside of the Dora Milaje, but insofar as the texture and the crispness that made Ragnarok and Black Panther movies about colonialism, and Iron Man 3, a movie about PTSD, and Doctor Strange, a movie about Beyonce, well, it's not got anywhere near as much to say for itself. Don't think you won't enjoy, you will, but don't go looking for a, death is better than bondage moment, because you won't find it here. You will find loads of explosions, laughs, and superheroic thrills, though, and, well, to be fair, that could well be what's getting you through the door in the first place for a superhero movie about a relatively untested and live-action character. Though, to be fair, that's worked out pretty well for Marvel so far. Actually, if you offset your expectations to something kind of in step with how you felt before you walked into the first Thor movie, you could very well come out of this with your mind blown, and, well, rightly so. It's a heck of a good time. I mean, 3 stars from me, no question. Just putting it out there, though, that with all the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff in there, I mean, it's kind of incredibly rich that they're doubling down on the S.H.I.E.L.D. element for the loud and proud female-driven installment when the actual Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. cast, whom, they've more or less told don't matter, is itself pretty heavy on the female superhero angle. I mean, Quake, Yo-Yo. But don't worry, Marvel, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. still loves you. Movie I loved this week was Maiden, which, like Captain Marvel, also opens on International Women's Day and focuses on the 30 years ago exploits of a trailblazing woman. In this case, a real one, Tracy Edwards, who in 1989 assembled the first all-female crew in the history of yachting to take place in the Whitbread Round the World race. Much to the staggeringly outward disgust of, well, both the sailing world and the media. It's a combination of contemporary talking head interviews with the reunited crew of Edwards' boat, which was called the Maiden, and, footage I'd never seen before captured on the boat itself with an old-school camcorder. It's riveting stuff, and what we actually learn from the interviews, like the perspectives offered by the crew of the Maiden, well, they make for just terrifically insightful, unmissable stuff. I thought this was a brilliant doc. I vaguely knew the story beforehand, but I was just hooked into this. There's a lot more to the story than you'd think. There are no superfluous elements in it, in that just as every member of the Maiden crew actually served an integral function, obviously, in the running of that boat, they also form an integral part of the documentary story of the Maiden as well. It's a really well-told story. It's just tightly put together, to the point, concise work from Alex Holmes, who, knows a thing or two at this stage about documentaries. 4 stars. I thought this was insanely good, and, well, there will absolutely be a narrative feature adaptation of this made at some point. I mean, just imagine for a second the cast you could put together, and, well, you'd get a BAFTA nom just for trying. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, rate, and review.